Yo, what is up guys, and welcome to another Wild Rift video. And in today's video, as you can see, I'm gonna be giving you guys a tier list for every single role in the game. And yet again, so much has changed. We got so many item changes, so many balance changes, right? Like the Darius nerf, the Veigar buff. There's just so much that changed. And also, I have been enlightened on new champions. Wink, wink, wink. Support the support one. Wink, wink. You'll want to see the support tier list. No spoilers. But before we get into the tier list, just a quick word from the video sponsor. This video is sponsored by wildstats.gg, and yet again, I just want to show you how the website works, because if you look up your name on this website, by the way, you can also look up my name. You can see all of the stats of a player. So with this sponsorship, I also want to do a giveaway. I'm going to be giving away one random legendary skin to a person that tells me their win rate of their most played champion. So put the win rate of it and let me know which champion it is, and also put your IGN in the description or in the comments. So here for me, as you guys can see, unfortunately, it's a 53.39 win rate on Darius. Yeah, what am I supposed to say? But let's look at the other two for me, right? Like we have the Jin on the 59.64 and then the Jinx on the 62.01. So, if you want to see what champions I have been playing, look, you can literally exactly see which champions I played. So I'm going to leave you guys my IGN, which is HellsDevil YouTube, #hell. Don't try to add me in game, I won't accept you, but you can actually look at my history. So if you want to see what I have been playing, and as you can see, it's a lot of Senna, a lot of Sona, there's a lot of different kinds of stuff right here. You can check it out right here. You can also exactly see your ranked progression and my rank progression. So don't forget to put in the comments what your win rate is and enter the giveaway. So back to the video. So here we get to the Baron lane, and is that a mistake right there? Is this a mistake? Did I just forget to fill out the S+ tier? No. Okay, I was contemplating for a very long time. I was thinking for a very long time, like, okay, wait, does this really make sense? Because right, like when I make these tier lists, I put the champions on like S+, S, A, or B, or C tier, depending on how strong I think they are. Then I look at like, is this champion really stronger than this champion? And funnily enough, no one made it to the S+ tier in my Baron lane tier list. And like, I was truly trying to put someone there, because like, I really wanted to put Camille and Gragas there, right? Like, these were the two champions that I wanted to put there, but they just don't belong there. They really do not belong there, because first of all, Gragas, I just feel like the meta does decently against him. Obviously, he's strong, like he's on top of the S tier, but it's just also an item got buffed which hard counters Gragas, which is the what is it called? The Banshee's Veil. These are all minor things, but all in all, I just feel he's not broken. He's just top of the S tier, which means really powerful. Same goes for Camille. But the thing about Camille is Camille requires a very skilled player, and Camille has been nerfed for the, Camille just has been nerfed. They nerfed the damage that the second ability does, and they nerfed the damage of her ultimate. So it really requires like a lot of skill to pull off Camille, but still, like, I would say the best Baron laner right now. Graves Baron lane with the Hull Breaker, very, very powerful, but perhaps a bit overrated. I used to put him in the S+ tier because when I played him, people just didn't really know how to play against him, but now they got a bit more used to it, right? Like, especially people got a bit more used to the Hull Breaker playstyle. So still sitting at a comfortable S tier. Like, I'm not saying he's bad or anything, but a comfortable S tier. No S+ tier, just a comfortable S tier. Now let's talk about Fiora, and this one is interesting because even though she got a seemingly massive nerf, right? Like, because they nerfed the range from her launch, they actually buffed the damage from it. And this damage buff keeps her in the S tier. She used to be like S+ tier, but she's still S tier. I honestly, after reading the changes of Fiora, I thought it would kill her. But after actually genuinely trying her, the thing is, they killed her against ranged champions. She really sucks against ranged champions. But against melees, believe it or not, she's actually stronger. Like, against a Garen, against a Renekton, Nasus, Jax, Sett, blah, 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 she's actually a little bit stronger. Just a little bit. But during all ins, she's stronger. So if you pick her into the right composition, I'll actually make a Fiora video very soon, guys. I will. Still an S tier champion. Garen is Garen. What am I supposed to say about this champion? Yeah, no, the jokes aside, Garen is just very solid, right? Like, super tanky, still the same powers that he always had. They keep nerfing him and nerfing him and nerfing, but he's still Garen. He still does work, and he still does incredibly well. Now Riven, I love Riven. I really love this champion because they actually reverted a nerf that they gave. Sorry, they didn't revert a nerf. They buffed her third ability. They made the shield last a little bit longer, so like you can constantly abuse the shield. So you go for full cooldown reduction Riven, and especially with the new Death Stance, which perfectly fits Riven, by the way. Like, she's strong, not broken, but strong. Clearly S tier, but also requires the skilled player. Like, she's basically like Camille. She requires a skilled player, but she's incredibly powerful. Now, Renekton got buffed. They buffed him in the late game. He got a very minor nerf in the early game, but the late game buff actually like pretty decent. It's yet again, you know, they're all just sitting in the middle of the skill. There is no real champion that is any like a lot better than all of the others. Because yet again, Renekton, he's strong. Don't get me wrong, he's super strong, but he's just not stronger than the likes of a Camille, Gragas, or Graves. So that is why S tier. Now let's talk about my boy Nasus. And honestly, putting Nasus in the S tier was one of the most satisfying things that I did in this tier list. So in the right draft, Nasus is S plus tier, maybe even S plus tier, completely broken. Basically, like in the right draft, he's completely broken. But in other drafts, he's around the A to S tier, right? Like there are still obvious counters to the Nasus, but one of those counters actually got nerfed, which is the Darius. So, you know, indirect buff right there. So if there's just no response to the Nasus, you can pick him and absolutely hard stomp a game. And even if the enemies do have counters to Nasus, Nasus is still strong. If you just know how to play him, I have a million Nasus videos and I'm a true Nasus master. You should check it out if you want to. Just look up HellsDevil Nasus. S tier champion, and it's incredibly fun to play too. Now let's talk about Seth, because yet again Seth getting nerfed, but of course he's sitting in the S tier. Seth just like this champion just has it all, right? Like he has the tankiness, he has the damage, he has the CC, he has the huge barrier, he has the big AoE damage with his ultimate. He really has it all. He can frontline, he can dive the backline, he can push away a champion from the backline, from your backline is what I mean. If you're up against a tank, he punishes the enemies for it. Like he just has it all. That's the problem of Seth. He has it all, and even if he's getting nerfed, he's still strong. Now Jax, and Jax like it really feels like Riot is like trying to kill Jax, but he's just barely clunging on his it's not a sword, it's like a lantern, to just stay in the meta. Like, man, I don't want to leave the meta, but they nerfed his attack speed, they nerfed his attack speed, they nerfed it and nerfed it and nerfed it and nerfed it up until the point that now it's like so much worse than before, but still a bottom S tier champion with the whole breaker in the Baron lane. Just very, very good. Irelia. Now, I hate Irelia, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I've played like 5 games of Irelia. I pretty much entered every single one of those games. It's gonna take me a while to get good enough at that champion to actually make a video. But yeah, Irelia is strong. I'm pretty sure you guys have all witnessed it, right? Like a super strong Irelia when you're up against it. She's just really, really powerful. Like, if the Irelia uses the first ability very well and hits her third ability, her ultimate, blocks your damage with the second ability, it's a super highly skilled champion. But in the current meta, super powerful as well. Divine Sunderer is also a great item for her. Trinity Force got buffed as well, which is obviously also a great item for her. She's just a great champion. Her items got buffed and she was already strong. And she got buffed recently as well. So S tier Baron laner for sure. Olaf, even though he's not really supposed to be a Baron laner, S tier, like super duper powerful Baron laner. His all-in potential at level 5 is like nearly unmatched by any other Baron laner. Like the only Baron laners that can really match an Olaf is Camille and Graves and Renekton perhaps, but after level 5 it's gonna be hard. But basically, if like only Graves and Camille can beat Olaf hard, otherwise Olaf just does those Olaf things, and then during team fights Olaf is Olaf, right? Like, and when you pick him with an enchanter especially, he actually becomes S plus tier. Jace, still very good. Yet again, this is another champion that keeps getting nerfed and nerfed and nerfed and nerfed, but he just still works. He still works. It's like an all-round good pick. He's pretty much always a good pick. He wins his lane very easily because he has ranged, and you know, in the mid game, he just does a lot of damage. He does a lot of damage. Squishes cannot do anything against him. He's just a very solid champion. Darius, even with all the nerfs, I just didn't feel like putting him on the A tier because I still feel he is decent. I still feel he is decent, especially with the Trinity Force buff, which is a good item on Darius. And it compensates for the attack speed that he's lacking. I just still feel he's good. I genuinely still feel he's good. Not amazing, but just good. You just really have to play around your ultimate much more now, because it's going to be harder to stack up your passive manually. So getting that ultimate reset becomes more important now. And basically Darius' skill ceiling has gotten up. It's gotten up. It's just harder to play Darius now. Next up is Singed. And this is probably one of the most underrated champions in the game. Probably like one. Well, I know he's one of the most underrated, maybe even the most underrated, because yeah, guys, Singed is strong. Okay, don't get me wrong, he's not broken or anything, but he's strong. He's really strong, and in the right composition, he's absolutely insane. Insane. You have to think of Singed like this: if he gets a Liandry's, you know, his poison plus Liandry's deals magic damage to the enemy over 7 seconds. All you have to do is hit the enemies once with your fart gas, and then you're going to be dealing damage over the next 7 seconds. So items like the Rylai's Scepter or the Green Book, which applies anti-healing, the effects of it are going to be applied for 7 seconds, plus even longer depending on the item. So if you can apply it to all of the enemies, like sure, Singed doesn't do that much damage, but you're going to be applying these effects to everyone for a really long time. It is so powerful. His utility potential is insane for team fights, and if you can play him correctly, yet again, I do have a lot of Singed videos, and I'm actually really good at Singed as well. I definitely recommend you to check them out. He is insane. If you never believed in Singed, this is the moment to pick him up, guys. Mundo Baron lane, very good with his first ability. His poking is great, and his late game is really good too, with his ultimate especially. Tryndamere Baron lane, this is pretty much the only lane that I would consider playing here. Tryndamere is good, but I don't know, like, he really only becomes good late game. Like, before level 5 he's useless, and even after level 5 his damage is just not that good. But when you reach those very high levels, that's when those 5 seconds of his ultimate become destructive, because in those 5 seconds he goes full crit, he deals crazy damage. And then Shen Baron lane, this champion, so his teleport is good. I just really like his teleport, and like, what to say about Shen? See, he has one major problem, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. He doesn't push waves, right? Like, he has his teleport ultimate, which is amazing, you know, which makes him a great split pusher. But the problem is he's actually not good at split pushing. So it's like, what are you supposed to do? You know, you're split pushing, but it takes you like 3 minutes to push a turret, so it just cancels each other out. But of course it's still good, because you can still apply pressure regardless of him not being able to push out waves fast. You can still apply pressure to turrets, and then of course you can use your ultimate across the map, give a shield to an ally, and teleport, right? Like, you can teleport to your ally and fight. Now next up is Malphite, and this champion is just like a very easy pick. Like, if you don't know what to pick Malphite, and you're always going to be doing fine. He's like a safe pick in the game, although struggles a little bit in this game because of the Divine Sunderer. Divine Sunderer is a hard countering item to Malphite, so that's basically why he's not in the S tier anymore. Still a solid A tier because he works into a lot of compositions, but just not an S tier anymore. Wukong in the Baron lane, very powerful, but he just has so many counters. Like, for example, the Nasus absolutely destroys the Wukong, right? Like, Set does so well into Wukong. It's just hard to play Wukong in the Baron lane. So you have to find the right draft and the right team composition, and then Wukong does very well. But yeah, it's not anything that you always want to be picking up. Akali in the Baron lane, same story. Like, she does very well in the mid lane, but Akali just works incredibly well into squishies, not into bruisers. She's just not that good into bruisers anymore after all the changes that she got. So she's like, basically Riot changed Akali from the old Akali to just a burst Akali. So you burst much harder, she deals much more burst damage, but she doesn't deal as much sustained damage anymore. So obviously bruisers, you know, they can defend against burst damage, and if she doesn't have that sustained damage anymore, she cannot win. So that's why in the Baron lane she's just not that good anymore. Pantheon in the Baron lane, you can win your lane pretty easily, but you're not going to be utilizing that ultimate as much as you would in the mid lane or in the jungle. So You can win lane, but you're not gonna carry the late game. That's the problem of Pantheon. And you're not gonna be utilizing your ultimate too much. I mean, of course you can gank mid lane, but you cannot gank the bottom lane, right? You cannot gank the dragon lane. So I don't know. It's basically like playing Galio or Twisted Fate in the Baron lane. It just doesn't make sense because you have an ability that can teleport you to somewhere. So you want to be in the middle of the map. Jarvan Baron lane, they nerfed it, the damage of that he deals, but still decent. Especially because they buffed his third ability as well. So you're going to be providing more support to your team. They actually buffed the attack speed of the third ability. So in the late game, you're going to be providing more value. And in the early game, you can just destroy the enemy with your first ability. You can just constantly poke him. Next up is Cannon, and Cannon is a bit of a hard one. Like if you get to the late game, you can hard carry the game, but yeah, you have to get to the late game. And I love to run Gathering Storm on Cannon. I'm actually gonna make a Cannon video very soon as well. And just his early game sucks. Like his early game sucks so badly. But only when you get a few items online, that's when he starts to come online as well, and his ultimate starts to hurt a lot too. But it honestly just feels like this patch also kind of counters him. Like the bruisers just do so well into him. Like they can tank up his damage and they just won't die. So I don't know. It's not a squishy meta. So Cannon needs to reach the very late game. Next up we have Kill, and I'm starting to fall in love with Kill again. You know, I'm playing Kill a little bit. I'm seeing Kill a little bit again. And it's just, if you can get to level 10, she doesn't deal that much damage, but she's very draft reliant. First of all, she's insanely broken into assassins. Like if the enemy have 2 assassins, she's an S tier pick. But you're not gonna see that every game, of course. Definitely, like, by the way, when you pick Kill, definitely at least against 1 assassin. Otherwise, you're kind of trolling. Like at least against 1 assassin. And then you just have to play safe all game long and get to the late game. Kill is S plus tier with a Yuumi though, but that's the only exception. If you play with a Yuumi, Kill is S plus tier, you know, if she constantly attaches to you in the late game. But yeah, I'm not gonna put her in the S plus tier just because of 1 champion. Teemo, meh. I mean, this champion is just, I don't know, like his early game is okay, and his late game is strong. But his mid game is like useless. That's the problem of Teemo. And almost every single game gets determined in the mid game. So your mushrooms are not going to do a lot of damage. Your basic attacks are really not going to do a lot. Your 1v1ing is not even that strong. Only when you get to the very late game with like 4 or 5 items, that's when he becomes insanely powerful again. But it's kind of too late then already, right? Next up we have Vayne. It's decent, but she got nerfed, and in the Baron lane she's just not gonna be that strong anymore. Of course you can still win your lane in the Baron lane, but Vayne nerf, she's just not really worth to run in the Baron lane anymore. So next up we have the jungle, and Olaf with a star even on top of the S plus tier, even with the nerf on his third ability. Like, he just feels way too powerful. He just feels way too powerful. His early game did get nerfed a little bit now with the third ability, but just when he ults, it's just always the same story. Olaf ults and he kills everyone. So just still an S plus tier champion. Next up, believe it or not, I put Evelynn in the second place. Oh, by the way, guys, make sure you give this video a like. It really supports the channel. And yeah, if you want to check out the sponsor as well, these are the things that support the channel the most. So if you want to, check it out. It's a really nice website as well. But let's continue the tier list. And Evelynn, the thing about Evelynn is, like, there's just no counter to her. There is nothing to stop her. Like, even if you use a sweeper, you cannot actually see Evelynn. So all you have to do with Evelynn, gank some lanes, get to the late game, and one-shot the squishies of the enemy. It's really that simple with Evelynn. Lee Sin, on the other hand, is a bit of a harder champion, but his early game potential is just insane. In the hands of a skilled player, you can gank so many times on Lee Sin and just make the enemy laners absolutely hate their lives, and they cannot do anything against it because Lee Sin just wins against 90% of the junglers in the early game. Next up is Kha'Zix, and Kha'Zix is the strong. His isolated damage is so big, and still, yes, still now he is an S plus tier jungler, and it's just crazy. Like, I feel like he needs to get a nerf, but what I think is the case is that Kha'Zix is not good in low elo, but only in high elo. I think that is why they're not nerfing him. So, like, if you're in high elo, you play Kha'Zix, right? Like, he's such a powerful champion. His ganking is also really good. He can secure objectives. His jungle clear is super fast. He really has it all. You do have to know how to play him though. I said that he has it all, but he really doesn't. He's not tanky, and his team fighting presence is a bit scuffed. But yeah, if you want to know more about this, make sure you watch some of my Kha'Zix videos. Next up, we have Xin Zhao, and Xin Zhao is insanely powerful. Like, actually, like, wait a minute. I mean, yeah, this makes a bit more sense actually, because those buffs that he received, oh boy, they are big. They are big, big buffs. His early game is so strong right now, and like his mid game is so strong as well, and only in the very late game does he actually fall off. He's still decent in the very late game, like 1v1s he wins, but in late game team fights he really falls off. But like his early and mid game completely compensate for it, and it's just so powerful. Next up we have Nunu. Nunu received those insane buffs. When you go for Rod of Ages plus full tank, he's really strong, although not quite as strong as I thought that he would be. You know, I actually thought that he would be broken with those buffs. But he's okay. He's okay. He's like really good S plus tier jungler, but not like on top of the S plus tier. Next up we have Gragas, and you guys know I love Gragas. This is just like, Gragas is always a good pick in the jungle. You go full AP Gragas or semi-tank Gragas with the Fimbo Winter, and it's just it's you do so much, you do so much damage. His ganking is absolutely amazing. His early game is decently strong, and his late game is like nearly unmatched. He deals so much damage in the late game. He can secure any objective. He has like one of the best smites in the game. This champion, it's crazy, he's so powerful, and he can even fight a Lee Sin in the early game. That's how strong he is. Next up we have Jax, and yet again, Jax nerf upon nerf upon nerf upon nerf, still sitting comfortably in the S tier. Like, how many nerfs is it gonna take to get Jax out of the S tier? Who knows? He's not amazing, but he's good. He's just good right now. And if you get to the late game, it's the same story. It's just gonna be a little bit harder to get to the late game now with Jax, because yeah, he farms much slower than before. Graves in the jungle, very, very powerful. With the Black Cleaver, with the Bloodthirster, with the Storm Razor, you know, the items just fit his playstyle. And Graves in the jungle is just very, very powerful. And he can take the jungle much faster now too, because of the buff to his first ability, which definitely makes him a super viable jungler right now. Next up we have Rengar, and the thing with Rengar is, you have to have the right playstyle, because with Rengar it's really all about his passive, which gives him 5% permanent bonus damage every time he gets a unique kill. You need to be playing around this passive. If you're unable to get those kills or assists up until like the first dragon, then you're gonna be struggling. You're gonna be dealing so like not enough damage basically. But when you do get those kills and assists, it amplifies your damage, makes you a very big burst heavy champion. And then reaching the late game, you can absolutely one-shot anyone. Really, really good. But basically, he's like a worse Evelyn. That is why he's sitting below Evelyn. Like, he does the same as Evelyn, but he's just worse at it. Next up, we have Wukong, one of the strongest team fighting junglers in the game. Wukong is like, I mean, you know what? He's here actually, like nearly S plus tier. You know, sometimes I think a little bit differently about a champion, but he's super powerful. Although his solo carry potential is not as good as some of the other champions right here, his team fighting presence is like insane. With that ultimate, it's absolutely amazing because it deals so much damage. It knocks up all of the enemies. His second ability creates a clone which distracts the enemy. His first ability heals him up. It's just amazing team fighting champion. So if you're looking for team fights, Wukong is the champion to pick. Next up we have Fiora, and as I said, right, like when you're playing Fiora in the jungle, her ganking did get hit a little bit because the launch distance is not as far, but her 1v1ing potential in the jungle became stronger because of that damage buff to her first ability. It became stronger. So, you know, Fiora is just a bit questionable. I kind of have to see a little bit more of her in the jungle to judge her fully, but I would be putting her in the S tier right now. Next to her is Camille, and yeah, Camille is just good in the jungle. Yet again, those nerfs did hurt her, but in the jungle it's okay. She can clear the jungles pretty fast with her true damage. She can secure dragons pretty well. Her ganking is really good with her ultimate, and her late game is insanely good. Camille late game is amazing. So, you know, you just have to get through that early game, use your ultimate to get some kills with the ganks, secure dragons, and get to the late game. That's basically the story of Camille. Next up we have Vi, and Vi has risen a little bit. Reason is because her jungle clear got buffed. She got like 7 bonus attack damage at level 1, which makes her jungle clear much faster. And now especially with the Rift Scuttler nerf, like this is also a thing that affects the jungle tier list. With the Rift Scuttler nerf, you can actually opt to go for a full jungle clear, like full jungle clear. And Vi is going to be significantly faster at that because she got that extra bonus attack damage in the early game. Next up we have Riven. Riven is very good. She clears jungle pretty decently fast. Her ganking is not as good, but her fighting potential is amazing. Riven is really good at fighting. Then also in the mid-late game does very well. And the fact that she can clear out jungle pretty fast helps a lot too, of course. And she's very powerful during team fights. So during those dragon fights, during those Rift Herald fights, she's very good. Morgana jungle, she clears the jungle insanely fast. And yet again, as I said, like these jungle clearing champions benefit a lot from the current patch because you don't have to go for the Rift Scuttler anymore. So champions like the Morgana can actually choose to go for a full jungle clear to get to that level 5, get a lot of golden experience, and get ahead of the enemy jungler. Mundo Jungle is insanely underrated, like a very underrated pick. I'm not sure why no one is really playing him. He's very good, especially against magic damage, you know, because then you can build the Spirit Visage, heal up, get magic resist, blah. So if the enemy picks the likes of let's say Akali and an Evelynn, or they pick an Orianna and an Evelynn, you just pick Mundo Jungle, go for the Spirit Visage, and tank their damage like an absolute boss. So a little bit draft reliant, but you can also pick him against a full AD composition and just go for full armor. So if you need a tank, you pick Mundo. Irelia jungle doesn't need an introduction, to be honest. It's Irelia. She's a stupid champion. And she clears jungle decently fast because her first ability gives her bonus damage, bonus attack speed. You can use it on all of the little jungle camps, and you're gonna be clearing your jungle very fast. Master Yi took a big hit. We all remember when Master Yi was just super duper broken, but now he took a hit. They nerfed his first ability. It deals much less damage to the jungle camps, and it deals much less damage to champions. So Master Yi is in his Master Yi spot right now, you know, sitting in the A tier. I still think it's a little too much. He needs to go down to the Yi tier. Only OGs remember the Yi tier since he got buffed. But yeah, Master Yi is just good right now. Rem is draft reliant but good. His ganking is very nice. His team fighting is pretty decent. His tanking potential is through the roof. So if you need a tank and your team has the damage, then Rammus is amazing. Jarvan is good. It's really good actually. And then especially with the buff to his third ability, which gives more attack speed to his allies now too, makes him more of a threat during team fights. And as a jungler, you're going to be team fighting very often. And his ganking is amazing because, you know, the third ability plus the first ability allows you to knock up enemies, allows you to get close to them super fast, and then your basic attack deals a lot of damage, your ultimate is amazing. He just really has all the tools to gank. And in the late game, he becomes a very formidable tank as well. So just overall a good champion. Pantheon, very aggressive early game. He beats out Lee Sin, so that's another thing about Pantheon. He beats out the Xin Zhao. So as a Pantheon, you can beat out those very strong junglers. So you can pick him as a counter to those. And his ganking is amazing. And his ultimate, of course, as a jungler, you can use it to gank, to go to objectives, and to help your team when they need you. So his early mid game is nearly unmatched, but of course, the whole weakness of Pantheon is his late game, where he's pretty much absolutely useless. Jayce jungle is great. His ganking is not as good, but his team fighting is amazing, and that totally compensates for it. But because he's not good at ganking, I've put him in the A tier, because ganking is a very important part in the jungle now, especially because of the Rift Scuttler nerf. So farming is not as good as ganking now, right? Like you really need to gank as a jungler. Next up we have Sett. Sett jungle is just not that good. His jungle clear is not that fast. His ganking is really good, but his jungle clear is not that fast. So yeah, he's good. I'm not saying he's bad, but I just don't recommend it anymore. Fizz jungle, it got nerfed too much. His jungle clear is not fast enough. He can get abused in the early game super hard. Like he can get invaded super hard, so it's just not worth it. Amumu jungle, I'm liking him a little bit more than before. I always put him in the C tier, but now I've put him in the B tier because he works well with like an all-in composition. You know, if you have Malphite plus Katarina, or Malphite plus Ziggs, you know, these kinds of Malphite, I'm saying Malphite. If you have Amumu plus Katarina or Amumu plus Ziggs, these are the combos that you want to be having, and that's basically the only compositions that he works with. Shyvana sucks. Don't play Shyvana. Trinidad in the jungle, no, it's just not good. His ganking is not good. Sure, his late game carry is great, but his ganking is just not good. Much better to play him in the Baron lane. Shan jungle, no. Just no. His jungle clears way too slow. So on to the mid lane now, and I changed up some stuff here too. So Diana, I shouldn't really talk too much about Diana. Diana always does good. She's very good into melee champions. She's very good into the likes of an Akali and a Katarina as well, right? She just does insanely well into those. And unless the enemy has a Galio, you can pretty much always pick a Diana. Next up is Irelia, and like, you know what's funny? Irelia is not even broken, but it's just, for some reason, every single Irelia player is just super good at the champion, because she's one of those champions that, you know, only one tricks play a lot of. So I put them in the S plus tier, because those one tricks, they play Irelia well. After that, we have Orianna. And Orianna is always a good pick. She's always a good pick. So sitting comfortably at the S plus tier, just play the early game. Late game, you hard carry, and you can get through the early game very easily because you can just farm insanely safely with your balls. So Orianna is just, and she's also good at ganking. That's the beauty. Like when you reach level 5, she's actually very good at ganking as well, and she's very good at jungle skirmish fights too. She also has a shield if she gets caught out. She has insane CC. She has it all. This champion has it all, and she's sitting in the S plus tier. Next up, we have Galio, and what I always say about Galio is draft pick. This is a draft pick. He's sitting in the S tier because in the right draft, he's S++ tier. In the wrong draft, he's A tier. So like a little bit of an in-between is S tier. Does the enemy have a lot of mage assassins? Or sorry, melee mages? You pick Galio and you just win the game. Do they have the Gragas AP? Do they have the Katarina? Do they have the Akali? Do they have the, what was the other pick? Evelyn. You pick Galio and you just win. You literally win. Galio in general is also very good into melee champions. So if the enemies have a lot of bruisers, etc., or basically melee champions and melee supports, everything melee, you go for Galio and you can taunt all of them. Your ultimate becomes more powerful against them too. Next up is Yasuo, and Yasuo with the Solari charge plate feels so powerful right now. The Solari deals so much damage, and I'm not sure why I'm not seeing a lot of Yasuo in my ranked matches now, because they also buffed him. They made the tornado go much faster now, so it's easier to play too. Yasuo is just very powerful, guys. Next up, a champion that is quite underrated as well, which is the Twisted Fate. Twisted Fate, just like his ganking is, he has the best ganking in the game as a mid laner. Twisted Fate, yes. The only thing that Twisted Fate lacks is sustained damage, but his burst damage is amazing. His CC is amazing. In the late game, his burst damage is through the roof. And his ganking also compensates for it. So you can get your side lanes ahead with the ganking that he provides. And then in the late game, you can use your ultimate as well to get constant vision across the map. So next up is Katarina. And Katarina is basically the same story as Irelia. But there is a bit more counters to Katarina. There is a bit more counters that I found out. You know, hard CC counters her. Champions like the Vi, for example, absolutely hard counters Katarina because she can very easily cancel out Katarina's ultimate. Basically, if you have a champion that can cancel Katarina's ultimate, it counters her. So we've kind of figured out Katarina. That's the thing. Even though there is insanely good Katarina players, she got nerfed a lot. And we figured her out. Players have figured her out and they know, okay, we have to cancel her ultimate. So if the enemies don't have a lot of CC, Katarina is still an S+ tier champion, but they will have a lot of CC, right? Like they will. Next up is Gragas, and AP Gragas, I'm not even going to say anything about him. We all know why he's here. He's just good. He's always a good pick, AP Gragas. He works everywhere. You can literally play him everywhere. And as you can see, you can do it in the mid lane too. Next up is Akshan, and while Akshan is not necessarily the biggest damaging champion, his third ability is amazing. It deals a lot of damage in 1 versus 1s. His laning is really, really good. He only doesn't have an escape. Like, his third ability is not a good escape because the enemy can body block it. But besides that, he's very good. He can win lane pretty easily. And in the late game, if you play him correctly, revive your allies, you know what it is, right? Like if you revive those allies and get those kills during team fights, you win the game. He has a game-winning kit, and he has a strong kit as well. Next up is Ziggs, and even though Ziggs doesn't seem to be fitting too well into the current meta, He's still an S tier champion. You have to be careful though, if the enemy have counter picks, you cannot pick the Ziggs anymore. But he's just a very, very solid champion. His bombs still deal insane damage, so he's just a very good champion overall. Next up we have Veigar, and Veigar hasn't been in the S tier for a really long time, and he entered the S tier. I actually made a Veigar video yesterday, if you haven't seen it already. It's really because of the buff that he got. His third ability, the cooldown got reduced by 2 seconds, which is huge for a Veigar. Like, in the late game, oh, the stun. And the stun duration is 2.25 seconds, by the way. It is just so dumb. And the cooldown is so low. You just put it down in the middle of a team fight and all of the enemies get stunned. And what was I gonna say? He works very well in the current meta as well, which is the melees. He does really well into melees as well, because the third ability, the cage, keeps them in the cage very, very easily. Next up we have Aurelion Sol. I've put a star on Aurelion Sol because I know, guys, I know the one trick Aurelion Sols, they do it. They pull it off and they just win every game with this champion. He's strong, like he's really strong. It's just that his playstyle is so incredibly unique that it really requires you to play him a lot to get good at. And I'm trying, but I'm just not good enough at him yet to make a video. Next up is Ari, which is basically an easier Aurelion Sol, but she doesn't scale into the late game. That's the payoff that Aurelion Sol gives you. So her ganking is amazing, her early game is amazing, her level 5 is amazing, but she falls off in the late game. The only thing that she can do in the late game is catch out an enemy, but besides, she's not gonna do anything. Like, her damage is just not enough in the late game to kill an enemy anymore. Jace, same story. I'm not even gonna talk about Jace anymore because yeah, y'all know it already. Same story, blah blah blah. He's just always good in the lane. He can poke, he has range, he can play it safe. His team fighting is amazing. Fizz, I think they fixed the Fizz bug. I actually put Fizz in like the C tier in my last tier list because he had a bug. Like if an enemy was running away, you couldn't hit your shark on him anymore. I think they fixed the bug now, although I'm not sure. If they haven't fixed it yet, then he's still in the C tier. But if they fixed it, he's in the A tier. In the middle of the A tier, just a solid champion. His ganking is good with the fish. His team fighting is good. His 1 versus 1ing is through the roof. No one really beats Fizz 1 versus 1 with his fish. And then his late game struggles a little bit because of the stasis enchants, but still very good because your ultimate is on a very low cooldown. Zed in the mid lane, I think they fixed the bug as well. Very, very solid pick. Just a very good pick, especially because they buffed the Yumo's Ghostblade as well, which is a core item for Zed. It has more lethality now. And Zed, like, you know, those all-ins are very, very nice, and even in the late game, but he has the same problem as a Fizz, which is the stasis and chance. These champions are just very similar to each other, but Zed is actually stronger in the mid game, and Fizz is stronger in the late game. So, you know, that's the only real difference between the two. Graves, it's funny that you can even play Graves in the mid lane, and he does very well into those melee matchups, like the Yasuo, like the Galio, like the Irelia, the Diana, you know, he does very well into those. So if you want to counter those, you just pick the Graves in the mid lane. Morgana mid, it's kind of a safe pick. Like if you got auto-filled in mid lane, just pick Morgana and try to hit your first ability on the enemies. It's just a good pick in the mid lane, basically. Now, Brandt is a different breed because this champion, although not in the S tier, can absolutely hard carry games. He's so powerful. Like his late game is crazy. Like how I still haven't made a video of him. I've played him a lot actually, but I'm still not satisfied enough with how good I am at him to make a video. But he's really powerful. He's really, really powerful. He can carry late game so easily, especially when you have a stasis enchant. Like if all of the enemies dive you to kill you, all you have to do is click on your ultimate and use stasis enchant. Your ultimate is going to be bouncing on all of them and deal massive damage. And oh, Brandt is just so amazing. I love it. Lucian in the mid lane, they buffed him. They buffed Lucian. They buffed the damage of his first ability, which makes the wave clear better. And, you know, he's just a better champion overall. He works very well in the mid lane because he can actually push out the wave very, very fast. So you can help your jungler at fights. Although he's not good at ganking, but he can just push out waves very fast to take away pressure from the mid lane. Corki is good with the package, just good. Like, nothing special, just good. Akali in the mid lane is significantly better than the Baron lane because here you can actually utilize her kit properly because she has a burst damage kit, and in the mid lane it works. Like as you can see, a lot of the mid lane picks are very squishy. So Akali in the mid lane does much better, and her late game potential is through the roof as well. She can carry late game very hard. Now Annie is a champion that I've been underrating as well, even with the massive nerf that she received. You know, the massive burst damage nerf. She's still in the A tier. She's so powerful. Like, if you play her correctly, I'm working on an Annie video. Don't you worry, guys. I'm working on a new Annie video. If you play her correctly, it's such a free win in the late game because she still one-shots squishies in the late game. And her bear actually is a threat in the late game now. Her bear actually deals quite a lot of damage in the late game now because that's what they nerfed, that's what they buffed about her. Next up is Karma in the mid lane. I mean, with the Luden's Echo, with the Rabadon's Deathcap, her first ability deals a whole lot of damage. I just don't feel she's anything like broken or anything, but she's just strong in the mid lane. Next up is Kill, and I'm a bit afraid to put him in the A tier because I don't want to encourage too many people to play Kill right now. But he's okay. There's so many assassins on top of the tier list, you know, like the Aurelia, like the Diana, like the Yasuo, like the Katarina. There's so many of them in the top. So if the enemies pick those champions, you can actually counter it with a Kill. Kill does well into them. But the problem is Kill sucks. Like, even if you get to the late game, her carrying potential is just not that strong anymore. But you can counter those assassins in lane with Kill. So I have been underrating Kill, regardless of how bad she seems to be. But she's draft reliant, only up against assassins. Next up, Sona. You can play Sona in the mid lane. It's okay. In the late game, it's very powerful, but you have to get to that late game. Next up is Lulu. Not too interesting to talk about. Like, if you want to funnel champions, you can pick Lulu in the mid lane. Seraphine is only good against melees, but there's a lot of melees that are good, you know, like the Diana, like the Aurelia, etc, etc. So if the enemy is a heavy melee composition, you can pick Seraphine in the mid lane. Lux. I mean, Lux is Lux. It's a very simple champion, but it can be a bit hard to hit her skill shots. It's really good to combine Lux with even more CC. Like, if your team has some CC, then you can follow up with your first ability as well. That's where Lux becomes insanely powerful. Like, if you constantly have to hit your first ability randomly on an enemy, it's a bit hard. Next up, Cannon. Just don't play Cannon in the mid lane. Teemo, don't play Teemo in the mid lane either. So now onto the Dragon lane. We've almost gotten to the support tier list, which is going to be my favorite. So here, Kai'Sa feels the best. I nearly put Kai'Sa in the S tier though, but I just still feel like Kai'Sa is the most reliable pick. She's just very good. She's just very good. And even though Blair of the Rune King got nerfed, she still feels like she's the strongest. And the thing is just like she can carry against it all. I personally think Jhin is stronger, but I myself also understand that Jhin struggles against tanks. Now Kai'Sa doesn't really struggle against anything, which makes her S+ tier. And about Varus, his early game is very strong, his poking is very strong, and then his late game is also quite strong with the execution of his second ability and the amazing ultimate that he has. And the beauty about Varus is he deals mixed damage. Even if you go for lethality Varus, like quite a significant portion of your damage comes from ability power damage, from magic damage. So even if the enemy has a lot of armor, you're still going to be dealing quite a lot of damage as a Varus. Next up we have Xayah. Xayah is very good. She does very well into those bruisers and into those champions that are just good in the current meta because of that ultimate and the root that she has. So, you know, she's just very good in the current meta. Next up is Jhin, which is obviously my favorite champion in the game. He's really good. He's really strong. And now you don't get free dragons and barons anymore. Like, that's basically why I've put him down from the S+ tier to the S tier. Because he used to be able to get any objective for free, but they nerfed it, which makes sense. But it's still the old Jhin. His passive is still buffed and he does a lot of damage. He does a lot of damage. His early game is good, but and his mid and late game is even better. So he actually skills into the late game and deals a lot of damage. Another champion that deals a lot of damage in the late game is Jinx. And Stormrazor is such a good item on Jinx. And the reason is, by the way, because you can hit a rocket with Stormrazor, which slows the enemy. Then you can hit your second ability for free because the enemy is slowed and they cannot dodge your second ability. Then they're going to be slowed by even more because your second ability actually slows by a lot. So, and then if you reach late game with Jinx, it's just game over, right? Like, if she has 4 or 5 items, her rockets just deal way too much damage. Next up is Vayne, and even though Vayne got nerfed, she still feels like one of the strongest ADCs in the Dragon lane. Yeah, I mean, she just really is. Even though they nerfed her, it's still Vayne. She doesn't do as much damage. Her early game took a big hit, but still, she is Vayne. Like, I'm not gonna repeat it again. She's Vayne, and she can still carry games. Next up, we have Draven. Draven is just good. You know, they buffed his ultimate a while ago. He doesn't feel too strong, but he also doesn't feel too weak. Just a comfortable S tier champion. You have to be good at him, but he feels very rewarding to play. Like, I play Draven too. It's a very rewarding champion, and he definitely feels strong. His attacks hurt a lot. Next up is Orianna for the same stupid reason. Brain dead champion. You can play her in the Dragon lane, farm yourself up into the late game, and just carry the game very easily. And next up, I actually for Ezreal, it is a guess. I have not played Ezreal yet in the new patch. I definitely will, by the way. I actually got a skin gifted by Miho de Luffy. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the skin. It's so amazing. So I'm gonna make an Ezreal video because of that. And I think he's bottom S tier. Multiple reasons. First of all, they actually buffed Trinity Force. You know, they buffed Trinity Force. It gives you more attack damage and more ability haste, I believe. What was it? I'm not sure. I don't know. But then also because of that earlier buff that Ezreal received, which is the 10% bonus AD ratio on his first ability. So, like, if you put that with more attack damage, it makes him stronger. I think he's not broken or anything, just a bottom S tier is what I think. I have to confirm it by playing him, but I'm telling you guys right now, this is a speculation. This one is a speculation from me. Next up is Caitlyn. She benefits a lot from Stormrazor, so she's a solid A tier champion. And she does really well into low range champions, like the Ezreal, right? Like, she destroys those champions, so... Caitlyn just a solid A tier, very powerful. So Caitlyn basically has a power curve like this. She starts off very strong, then she becomes weak in the mid game, and she becomes very strong in the late game again. I don't know why it works like that, but basically early and late game she's very powerful, but her mid game sucks ass. That is why she's not in the S tier. Lucian is very strong as well. He just lacks a little bit of range, but he's very strong. So actually I would put him stronger than Caitlyn. Yeah, I would put him stronger than Caitlyn. He's just very strong. He does very well. He benefits from the Stormrazor as well. And he just does very well. Like, but what am I supposed to say about him? He's just a very solid champion. Always does well, unless you're unable to get close to the enemy. Because the only thing that sucks about Lucian is his very low range. Next up is Ashe. They nerfed Ashe's second ability, so the poke build is not viable anymore. Which only makes like a basic attack reliant build viable now. And it is it's a good path to take. But the problem now is that you're very draft reliant. She does very well into those melees because she can maintain a distance and shred their HP. But yeah, her early game is just not that strong. It's really only about her mid-late game, and games get determined in a lot of games already get determined in the early game. So it's just not really worth to pick Ashe always anymore. Yeah, she's still strong, but she's draft reliant. And if you want to know more about this, I made an Ashe video very recently. Just look up HellsDevil Ashe and you can watch it, and you'll hear more about it. Corki. In competitive, Corki is like S tier or S plus tier, but in solo queue, meh. He has the same problems as Lucian. He doesn't have a lot of range. Sure, the package is amazing, but with the dragon nerf, you know, it indirectly nerfs the package as well, because the enemies can just handshake and not fight for the objectives and just leave the Corki be, not even fighting with the package. Next up is Ziggs. It's good in the dragon lane. It's good. You can win your lane very easily, but yet again, there is counters to Ziggs. Like, for example, if the enemy picks a Jhin, you automatically lose your lane as a Ziggs. If the enemy picks a Caitlyn, you lose your lane. If the enemy picks a Varus, you lose your lane. So there's counters to it, but if these counters don't get picked, you can pick the Ziggs. Now, Veigar in the dragon lane, this is also speculation. I used to play Veigar in the dragon lane, like when he came out, and it was actually very powerful, but I'm just not sure how good people understand how to play against Veigar with a support now. Because, for example, if you play with an Alistar, your Alistar engages, and then you put a cage around the enemy and you kill the enemy. Or if you play with a Leona, your Leona engages and you put a cage around them. So it's a very powerful combo. I'm just not quite sure how good people know or if people actually know how to counter this combo. But my speculation is to put him in the A tier. Next up is Tristana. She benefits a lot from the Storm Razor, but still, she takes really long to come online, and just her early game sucks. Her early game sucks so badly, she takes very long to come online, and yeah, I would just bottom 8 here. Not amazing, not too bad, just okay. Next up, Twisted Fate Dragon Lane. I don't like it. It just doesn't do that much damage. Yeah, it's okay, you know. With the gold card you can stun an enemy. With your third ability you have a lot of attack speed, which works very well with the Blade Rune King because he has a lot of attack speed, but man, it's just not that good. It's really not that good, especially compared to the other ADCs, which provide much more value than the Twisted Fate. And when you put him in the Dragon Lane, you're not going to be utilizing his ultimate as much, as I told you guys earlier in this video. So it's just, I don't recommend it because you want to have that ultimate. Akshan in the Dragon Lane, meh, you know, he does very well as a mid laner, but as a Dragon laner, it just feels like he lacks sustained damage. You know, he lacks the sustained damage that a lot of these Dragon laners provide, or even the burst damage. It's hard to explain why he sucks as Dragon Laner, but what I said earlier, that's my explanation to it. Basically, he just doesn't have as much sustained damage, unless, of course, you're able to constantly get kills and assists in a fight, but it's just really risky. It's really risky to be playing him like that, so you're just generally going to be much better off picking any other ADC than the Akshan. Now, Misfortune, there was actually a period where Misfortune was broken for me, but that period has gone away. I don't know why. Maybe it's the meta changing, because Misfortune didn't actually get nerfed since that video that I made on her being broken. I don't know, actually. I really don't know what happened. Like, what the hell happened that made Misfortune not viable anymore? Because she really isn't viable anymore. She's not that strong. Like, I couldn't figure it out really, but yeah. She's not that strong. Next up is Senna, and Senna is a support. Don't play her in the Dragon Lane. They nerfed the range that she gets from her souls now. She's just not really worth it in the Dragon Lane anymore. Next up is gonna be my favorite one. It's the support tier list, guys. Oi, oi, oi. So my support tier list changed massively, like absolutely massively. So let's get into it immediately. One thing that hasn't changed is Yuumi sitting in the S+ tier, even with a star. And funnily enough, believe it or not, Yuumi actually got a pretty big buff in the recent patch. I don't know why. Apparently Yuumi has a low win rate, but Yuumi is just so powerful. Oh, she's so powerful. And now she's even more powerful. Oi, oi, oi. This champion, because like you can just play with a good player and constantly attach to the good player, and the good player is gonna carry the game because he has a Yuumi attached to him. So next up is Thresh, and Thresh is a very high skill support but very rewarding, very rewarding. You become very tanky in the late game. Your early game is super strong with that third ability and the hook, and during team fights as well, the ultimate is amazing. The second ability is amazing to get an enemy close. His ganking is amazing, right? Like he can pull an enemy with his third ability, he can pull an enemy with his first ability, and he can get his jungler close with his second ability. So he just like such a good support. His ganking makes it so good. It just everything. Next up is Rakan, and full AP Rakan. I made a video about it a few days ago. So powerful. Like early game, he's decent with his knock-up, but then the mid-late game is where the real power comes through. You know, when you finish the Rod of Ages, when you finish the Rabadon's Death Cap, like you're playing support, but you deal so much damage, so much, and all of his abilities scale with ability power. His passive, which is the shield, becomes massive. His first ability, which is the healing, becomes massive. His third ability, which gives a shield to his allies, becomes massive, like massive shielding. So I'm not sure why they keep buffing Rakan, because they actually buffed him in the current patch too. They buffed his mana. He's just insanely powerful in the current patch. Next up we have Nami. This is a champion that is super strong as well. They actually nerfed Nami a little bit. They nerfed the passive movement speed, but it's a very insignificant nerf. So she's still Nami. She still has the healing, the damage, the ultimates, the first ability, the bubble, you know, the buffs. She has it all. Her laning is very powerful too. She can pretty much win the laning matchup against pretty much anyone, especially in the early game. It's just very strong champion. Karma, with the shielding, very powerful. You know, you go for enchanter items like the Ardent Censer, the Staff of Flowing Waters, etc, and you're constantly going to be able to spam your shield and just provide so much value to your team in team fights. And believe it or not, You got your girl Sona right there. The last time I made a tier list, I believe, I believe I have never ever put Sona above the B tier, I think. Perhaps an occasional A tier, but there is absolutely no way that I've put Sona anything above like the bottom A tier. And oh boy, was I wrong. Oh boy, was I wrong. And I'm gonna admit it, and I'm gonna say it. Oh boy, was I damn wrong. Sona is so powerful. It is like, why is this champion so powerful? How did I not know about Sona for like a whole year straight? How is that even possible? How have I been sleeping on Sona for so long? She is so good. She's so good. I have a 65% win rate in Challenger, and I played her for the first time in a ranked match in Challenger, or sorry, in Grandmaster as well. Make sure you check out my Sona video. Just look up HellsDevil Sona. I only have one because I only recently discovered Sona, but just this champion is super strong, super strong. Next up, we have Lulu. Lulu buffs ADCs really, really well, and also like when you have an Olaf or a Jax in your team as well, Lulu is just a very good champion to buff that. She provides a lot of attack speed, a lot of bonus damage on the attacks, just works very, very well with a carry. It's basically like Yuumi, but just not quite as good as Yuumi. Braum works very well if the enemy has a lot of projectiles to throw. He blocks them, of course. And then Braum also works very well if you can apply your passive to the enemies. The stun is super, super long, and his team fighting is very, very good. Galio support works very good when you're roaming around a lot. Like Galio as a support may not be able to provide as much value in the normal things like the laning matchup, like the fights, but basically he can gank, and in the late game his ultimate is very, very good too, and his second ability is amazing to taunt the enemies. But the biggest beauty is ganking with Galio, because the third ability, the taunt, the first ability, his passive, it all deals so much damage, so you can gank very effectively with the Galio. Next up is Alistar, which is perhaps the best diving champion in the game. If you have the tools with you, you know, if you have like a Draven or something, or just a very strong jungler to dive with, Alistar can engage under turrets, use his ultimate, tank up for 7 seconds for free, and come out of it pretty much unscathed. I don't know what that word means. I just used a random word, but you know what I mean, right? Like he comes out of it very easily because he's super tanky. But the thing about Alistar is it's a very hard champion to play. I made an Alistar video very recently. Just look up HellsDevil Alistar if you want to see it. It teaches you how to play this champion because it's a very hard champion to play well. You really have to understand how to play him, but he's top of the A tier. Very, very strong. Another very strong champion is Leona. Same story as Alistar. You know, she dives very well. Her CC is incredible, but she's hard to play. You have to play her correctly, and then if you can pull her off, a very, very strong champion. Next up is Janna, and the thing about Janna is her third ability is strong, the shield. Like it gives a massive shield and it gives a lot of attack damage to her allies. Her ultimate is decent. The thing about her ultimate is it gives a lot of healing to your allies, but it puts you at one spot, so you're a little bit vulnerable. But if the enemies just, you know, if the enemies cannot take you out very easily, your ultimate provides massive value, especially if the enemies just dive on your team. Your ultimate can push them away. So if you're up against the likes of a Graves, for example, and he goes on your allies, you can use your ultimate to push him away, which is really, really powerful. Next up is Gragas. Yet again, Gragas can be played literally anywhere. And Gragas is basically the same story as Galio. He can gank very well as well. So he's really, really good at ganking too. Perhaps not as good as the Galio, but he's good at ganking too. So, you know, his first ability is not going to do a lot of damage because you're going to be going for tank items. So your laning is really not that good. But it's about the ganks and about the late game. About the ganks and the late game, that's where he becomes very good. A very underrated support is Blitzcrank, especially after the buff they did to his second ability. He can hook a little bit easier now. His tankiness is still the same as before, and if you just play him correctly, he's pretty decent. And in the late game especially, I love how people think Blitzcrank is an early game champion, because you know, they think like, yeah, he's only good in the early game because he can hook enemies. In the late game he can't do anything because he doesn't have anything. But the funny thing is, Blitzcrank is actually an absolute late game champion, because his hook, if you hook an enemy in the late game, you can easily pop a flash or even kill that enemy. Secondly, his ultimate. It's gonna be on like a 15-second cooldown in the late game. Combine it with a Zeke's Convergence, which slows all of the enemies around you. It's really, really powerful. So next up we have Lux. Lux is very strong as a support, and you can play her two ways as a support. As a supporting support, you know, with Harmonic Echo, with Ardent Sensor, etc, etc. Or you can play her as a Giga Chat support, which is Luden's Echo, Rabadon's Death Cap, just full one-shot. Both work, but it's just a bit hard to play Lux well. But it definitely works. It definitely works, don't get me wrong. Next up is Soraka. Very strong champion as well. You know, her healing is very good. That's really all I have to say about Soraka, to be honest. Her healing is just very good. Yeah, and in a late game, it's like Sona, but not as good as Sona. Her healing is like incredible in the late game. All you have to do is just don't get caught. If you get caught, you die, but if you don't get caught, the healing that she provides is amazing in the late game. Next up is Senna support. Senna support does a lot of damage. She's very, very good at carrying the game in the support role as well, but she doesn't just, like, she's not really a support. She doesn't really provide as much as the other supports do. Like, her CC is very bad. You know, her second ability CC is very bad. Her healing is okay on her first ability, but like if you compare her to the other champions, right? Like, look at what Rakan can do, for example. His ultimate, his second ability, the shielding, blah, 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 blah. Look at what Karma can do. The rooting, the ultimate, the damage, the slows, the buffs to her ally. Look at what Sona can do. Team-wide healing, team-wide buffs. And now look at what Senna does. Just a silly ultimate which provides a locket, a little bit of healing on her first ability, a root on her second ability, and like a weird third ability which doesn't make you invisible, it just kind of makes you untargetable. But Senna deals damage. And that's the compensation that you get for Senna. She deals damage, and she does a lot of it too. So if you have a lot of tanks in your team and you need the damage, that's when you pick Senna support. Pantheon support is decent. I don't know why I put him all the way there though. Wait, he's not. Pantheon support is decent. Like, early game you can catch out enemies, and I recommend Pantheon support with like a late game champion. You know, if you have Pantheon with a Jinx or something, because Pantheon allows you to get some kills early game, which gets the Jinx a bit easier to the late game. And then Jinx can carry the late game, right? Like, and also you can roam around as a Pantheon. You can stick around the mid lane and then gank with your ultimate wherever you have to. Next up is Seraphine. Seraphine support is actually quite good if you're good. It's a pretty high skill capped champion, but if you can play her, she's very good. Yet again, she's really good against melees, but as a support, you can get away playing against a few ranged champions as well. She's just great. Like, her second ability as well provides a lot of healing. And if you go for the supporting items like the Harmonic Echo or the Ardent Sensor, her second ability is very powerful for those items because it provides the buffs to all of her allies. So the Ardent Sensor, the Staff of Flowing Water, these items are exceptionally good on the Seraphine. And her late game is unbeatable. Like, if you get late game with Seraphine, it's really, really powerful. Shan support, I don't really want to talk about it. It doesn't work. Malphite support, yet again, like, the only instance that Malphite support would work is like full AP Malphite support, where you basically try to one-shot the enemies. It's really not that good, but it works, so I'm still putting him out there. Ashe support, it's okay, you know, with the Blair of the Rune King, with the Black Cleaver and the Runaan's Hurricane. Like, I only recommend it if the enemy has like a lot of heavy tanks, because you can slow those tanks and you can shred their armors very easily with the Black Cleaver. Next up, Annie support, don't play Annie support. Amumu support, don't play Amumu support. And then Kill support, I've seen it from Throttles, who is the #1 Sona currently on EU. But I haven't seen anyone else play it. I don't recommend it. So that is it for the tier list video. I'm gonna be going to bed now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next Wild Rift video. Bye bye.